Hi, I'm Victoria from Old to Ooh La La. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to do a darling project that I'm really excited about. I hope you'll like it too. While you're here, hit that subscribe button. It'll be down in the bottom of the right-hand corner of the screen throughout the entire video. And you can also find me over on Facebook at Old to Ooh La La. So let's get started. This is a 23 by 6 thin sign that I got at Dollar Tree. We're going to start our project laying down 2 coats of a light colored chalk paint. You want a light color so your decoupage shows through very nicely. Now I'm going to decoupage these darling bee napkins. I've done most of the project. I'm just saving an end piece to show you. I generally start by adding just a little bit of Mod Podge at the top. I straighten my piece, make sure it's anchored properly. Always using my plastic so my fingers don't stick. And then I just work an inch at a time. You want to pull a little taut. When you're pulling away that plastic, don't just rip it off. Go a little bit slow because it will stick and you can tear your napkin. So work in a few inches at a time, laying down your plastic, smoothing it out. You'll get no wrinkles. We've decoupaged and it's dry. You can hit it with a blow dryer to get it to dry quicker if you'd like. Now I'm going to lay out my letters. These are my letter stamps. They're retro. And I've measured everything out, and what I like to do is take a little pencil and do a little tick mark so I know where to put them back down. Then I put it on my thin mount. I ink it. Now I can come back to where those little pencil marks are, and I know exactly where my stamp should go. And those erase very easily. I like to use a white eraser that doesn't leave any marks behind. Anchor with one hand, press with the other. I've made my tick marks down here so I can just go ahead and ink my letters. Line them up with those pencil marks. Anchor with one hand, press with the other. Very important, you don't want things to shift. More stamping, more inking, line it up. Go ahead and lay it down. Voila, perfectly stamped letters. I wanted to make a beehive out of the Trimmings 3 mold, but I needed it to kind of curve in a round way towards the top. So I made 2 castings using 3 of the, kind of looks like a flower to me, 3 of the, we'll call it a flower mold. I like to use my brayer to really drive the clay down into all the detail. It also gives me a nice flat back. So I made 2 of those, and then I ended up cutting all around to make it smaller so I could get that kind of gradient thing where it got smaller towards the top. You can see I'm cutting it apart there. Just cut the little flower parts out. And then I took the little leftover in-between pieces and pinched those off. So they'd come to a point. And then I just arranged everything to my eye. You can see the piece that's done there. I just take my warm fingers and kind of smooth out all my edges on my clay pieces. That works really well. And then I just did that again using 2 of the little flower pieces for the top. And then I topped it with a crown from laurel. There I've just arranged the pieces, and I've taken those little pieces that I cut off and kind of slipped them down into the openings. And there's some open area there that we have to fill with more clay, but we'll do that in the next segment. So it worked out really well. It gave me a nice kind of rounded beehive effect, which is exactly what I was going for. So that's all I did. And then I make 2 more to go up to the top. And that's how I made the beehive. Once my clay dried, the pieces separated quite a bit, which is okay. I don't mind cracks, but when you're putting pieces together like this and they separate that much, you need to do something about it. So I make what I call little snakes, and I just take a wet Q-tip and I push those little snakes down into the cracks and smooth it with the wet Q-tip, and it works perfectly. And you'll be able to see at the end when we paint, you can't even tell. So that's all I'm doing here. I drive that clay down in there with the flat part of my finger and with a damp Q-tip, and just fill those cracks in with clay. It works really well. Make sure you're not covering detail. And you can use, I don't know, any kind of tool or anything to kind of clear out detail, like the little petals of those kind of flower-looking things could fill up with clay, and you want to make sure that doesn't happen. So you just make your little snakes, lay them in your cracks, smooth them out with your finger, take your wet Q-tip and drive the clay down in there, and then brush away the excess. Of course, we're doing this on very dry clay. It has to be very dry. See how I'm using my fingernail to kind of dig the clay out from around places that I don't want it. And it works really well. And then I'll go all the way to the top with that method. Here I'm using a playful background stencil, and I'm using a texture compound that with a putty knife, and I'm just dragging it across very thin. You want it to be quite thin, and I'm just dragging it across. It's super easy, it's super quick. It's hot pink, and when it dries, it's white, and that's when you know that it's dry. Be careful when you pull it off, because you don't want to take all of your design off. Voila! So everything's dry now, and believe it or not, I'm going to paint almost the entire board black. I'm going to outline the letters so I can still see the bees from my decoupage paper, but I'm just painting everything black. Try not to get it too wet, because that decoupage paper could start to roll up, and you don't want that to happen. And I've taken a flat brush with kind of a knife's edge just to trace around my letters, and that worked really well. Here I've taken a creamy yellow color that I've blended up, and I'm going to paint my beehive. My beehive's completely dry, and you see where we tucked in that clay to fill up those spaces. You can't even tell now, it looks perfect. I'm going to paint everything but the crown. I'm going to paint the sides too. So I'm going to paint the entire thing this kind of soft golden yellow, with the exception of the crown. And I believe that's just acrylic paint. It's two different kinds of acrylic paint that I mixed up there. Now I'm going to take that same yellow paint, kind of golden yellow paint, and I'm going to dry brush. I have a chip brush and I'm offloading it, and I'm just dry brushing almost the whole face of the board. Heavier on the honeycomb, and then just bringing some of that color out onto the black so it's not quite so stark. And I kind of work all around the letters, hitting the honeycomb a little bit harder. You can blend it out with a towel if you need to. It's not precise work. Don't make yourself crazy thinking it has to be perfect, because you're going to be antiquing and gold leafing on top of everything. So this is just another layer. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, concentrating most of the color on the honeycomb. I've gone from one end of the board all the way to the other. This is the oh my goodness part of the project, I think, where I'm not quite sure if it's going to work or not. One of my favorite parts of a project is when you get to apply the antiquing gel, because there's such a great payoff. I use Valspar antiquing gel. It only comes in one color. It's a very, very dark brown. This entire board has been sealed with polyvine. You must seal things before you put antique gel on them. So at this point, I'm just taking a soft brush and I kind of use a little scrub motion, because you want to work all that antiquing gel down into all the little cracks and crevices. And then I take a wet wipe and just kind of wipe everything back to your liking. Some people like more antiquing, some people like less. I make sure to cover all my edges. You don't want any of the yellow or the white paint on the crown to show. And yes, we are antiquing the entire beehive. All the edges, make sure you look at from all sides. Take your wet, I do a little pounce, come back with a clean part and do a bit of a wipe, push the sides in. Here's that little clean part. I'm just going to wipe it back. I'm going to get down close to those little inside edges there because they look too dark compared to the ones on the bottom. I want everything to look kind of uniform. At this point, I might add a little more just in certain places. Generally, I take a little fine-tipped brush and do that. I'll be adding a little bit more to the crown. And then just one final very, very gentle wipe back across that crown. Here I just gently brushed Rub and Buff across the high points. I like the gold leaf color. It looks the most gold to me, and I'm just hitting the high spots. And then I'm going to go and brush it across the middle of those. They look like flowers to me on the beehive. Here I'm using this very gold paint to just lightly outline some of the honeycomb. I didn't do every single bit of it. I just hit some spots to kind of highlight it. I wasn't too careful about it. This is a very, very bright gold paint that shows up really well. I also used that paint to outline my letters. I used a very thin brush and just used that gold paint to outline my letters, and that really made it pop. Up to that point, those letters really weren't doing it for me, but once I outlined them, that was the ticket. These little bees, I took my antiquing gel and that very gold paint and just a real thin little brush and just colored them in. And I kind of like the translucency of the gold paint and the antiquing gel. I brushed it heavy on the wings and then wiped it back so I could get like the little veins from the wings to kind of pop, and that worked really well. And then I gave the wings just a very, very light, almost like a dry brush of the gold. Here I used some antiquing gel and just went over the honeycomb part of the piece and wiped it back. I didn't spend a lot of time. What I wanted was for all the little edges of the honeycomb to kind of catch that antiquing gel. It needed some more depth. So you can see it's pretty easy. I didn't wipe all of it off. I did kind of a gentle wipe because I wanted that depth of color. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, just go ahead and pop them down in the comments and I will get back to you.